Okay, hello. This is a tutorial which is part of a commission of mine where I'm going to run through all of the steps required to bring this sword, the Atlantean, into Elden Ring, complete with custom stats, icon, name, and caption. So, the first step of this commission is getting this model ready to appear in game. That means exporting the mesh, getting the textures ready, and setting up the materials within the FLVER file in the packed archives. We're going to start by finding a template, which for us, this specific weapon will be the Royal Greatsword, which is part number 602, I believe. This is the Royal Greatsword, and that is what we want as a base for this weapon. They're about the same size, and it has the right move set already, so there'll be the least change needed. In order to open this, I'm going to... Well, actually, first, in order to get to this file, I used UXM Selective Unpacker. You simply find the executable of the game you want to unpack. Last game I unpacked was Dark Souls 2, but, just browse to Elden Ring, click Unpack, and then in the parts folder, this is where you find the equipment. So, 602, drag that onto Witchy BND. You can also set it up to automatically assign, but open it with Witchy BND. And up at the top, it is now a folder. We have the TPF, that is the texture file, and FLVER, that is the file that contains information about the model, all the mesh data, the material, and kind of skeleton, texture data, all of that is held within this file. So I'm going to drop that onto Bloodborne Model Extractor v3. It's I don't know much about this program. It's just one that I found works. It exports the model as a source engine output. And here we go. Model 602. If I import this, it imports at the correct scale with the correct orientation and most importantly, the correct skeleton and bone weights, which I've had trouble with getting with some other methods of extracting files. That's why I use this one. So I'm going to go into edit mode with this model and try and align it as best I can to the Royal Greatsword. I'm just gonna go for something like that right now. It is noticeably shorter, but that should be fine. I'm not too bothered by that right now. So, now that the model is in the right space, what we need to do is select the Elden Ring model and then hold Control and select your model. Make sure that your model is the brighter shade, meaning it's the active selection. Go into Object, Link Transfer Data, Transfer Mesh Data, Vertex Groups, switch this to All Layers. Oh, there you go. And then click off of it. So now we can see in here there are the correct vertex groups. This was already here before for me because I've already messed with this model a little bit, but these are the correct vertex groups needed for the game to animate the weapon correctly. If It's not too important for swords because swords don't always animate. You may not even have to do this for swords if there's no special kind of animations they're used for, but it's best practice, I assume. What I'm then going to do is go into edit mode on the Elden Ring weapon and delete all vertices, and then join my model onto the Elden Ring model mesh. This means that now if I go into weight paint and I select this, you can see it is weighted to the correct vertex, and also the model it's got an armature, correct to the correct skeleton. It's all A-OK. I would consider this ready to go. So we go into File, Export, FBX, and now once you've got a place to export it, I'm going to export it here. Make sure you go into Armature and turn off Add Leaf Bones. You don't want those. Then you export FBX, and this is all good. The next thing we're going to want to do is download and use Mod Engine 2. So you simply go to Releases, download the archive, and I'm going to extract it into here. This will give me sort of a usable instance of Mod Engine that I can use specifically for this project. And it's good to separate your mods into instances when we get to a program we use later, Smithbox, as well as Map Editor. They kind of rely on there being a project folder, which is this mod folder, by the way. So what we're going to do with this mod folder is add a copy of that sword. So if we add parts, just as it is in the Elden Ring unpacked file tree, and then put in our 602 B&D file, we can now edit this, and we can close that now. So right here we have the model file and the texture file. I like to address the textures first if I have them. So I have in here, the model has color, metallic, and normal PNGs. Elden Ring requires DDS format for its textures, and so we're going to have to open these in Photoshop. You can use paint.net as well, I believe. First thing I'm going to do with the normal texture is get it ready for Elden Ring. As you can see, this normal texture is all very blue. Most normal textures are very blue with some funky colours on. Elden Ring hates that. They use the blue channel as a way to show kind of shininess. So what I would suggest is either, what I might do for most is simply get a black pen and now it is a lot more yellow and a lot more it looks a lot more like the normal textures that you might see in a original FromSoft model. For example, if I go into here, I can open the normal for the Royal Greatsword, and as you can see, there's a lot of yellow, a lot of blue. but it's a lot more yellow than normal. What you might also want to do, like as I said, the color channel is used for reflectiveness or kind of shininess, is put in the metallic channel into the blue channel. So the metallic texture into the blue channel. What this can do is create shiny metal parts with less shiny leather parts. It's really up to you. You can custom do it yourself. This model, the shiny texture is very much just a plain white, so I'm not quite sure how I feel about it, but we'll go with this anyway. And then if it looks bad, we can always come back to it. So what we now need to do is replace the old textures with these new ones. That's very simple. Just save as, hide my quick access, go into the unpacked TPF file and save as DDS. There are plugins for Photoshop that you need to export as DDS. The NVIDIA Texture Tools exporter seems to work just fine. The Intel plugin that I've used that before, it gives you a lot of options, which means there's a bit of setup, but in general, this one seems to work fine. So we're going to replace _A for albedo, which is the color texture. Now we are going to do the same with metallic, and now we are going to save the normal texture. So now all three textures have been replaced. They all have the same name, as we are initially just going to replace the model and make sure it looks good. So let us repackage this TPF by dragging the folder onto WitchyBND again. And now this TPF holds all of our texture information. Right, now let's load up the FLVER in Pairs FLVER editor. I'll link it down below. It's quite a good editor for these kinds of things. Let's delete the old model. I'm going to also delete the old material, although I'm not sure if you can. Right, so we just go straight into model, import, and we find the FBX we saved previously. We can see up here it's found the mesh, although the material, it doesn't really know what to go for. When making your own model or adding your own model, I suggest caption _e, sorry, or just caption. The basic caption materials, they seem to work for me. And there we go. The model is here. It looks fine. Now we click on textures and we have one spot for each of those texture files we had earlier. I go into the parts folder, into the unpacked TPF folder, and here are the textures that we've edited. If we just select those, M in metallic and N in normal, we can now save and repackage this this part file by dragging it onto WitchyBND. This doesn't always take so long, it depends. This model is very high detail, has some very high detailed textures, and so the parts file is quite big. But once the part file is compressed, or not, so is repacked, we can go back up, launch Elden Ring. Here we are on my test character. And now if we grab the Royal Greatsword, we can see it looks quite good. The model's definitely been imported. The textures are aligned correctly. As you can see, it's very reflective. I don't mind it on the blade, but I think I'm actually going to go ahead and refine the texture a little bit on the gold. There is some clipping on the hand when two-handing. Maybe on one-handing as well, actually. Yeah. So it might also be worth going back and refining the model. It's already weighted correctly, and the weighting for the sword is not complicated, so there's no real harm in just reshaping the model. First step is editing this. Now, let's go with a middling grey. So let's look here. Where is everything is gold here except this right side. This right side is the sword. This text I actually want to be a matte color. So if I can select all parts of this text, or patterning, I'm not really sure, this might be text. Based on the name of the sword, I would assume it's probably something in Atlantic, but regardless, it shouldn't be shiny. So all of this is selected. Let's now copy, bring this over to the normal map, and paste it in. Rather annoyingly, it's lost its transform, so we're going to have to realign it. Oh, that looks pretty on this, pretty spot on already. Maybe move it to the right a tiny bit. Yeah, okay. And I'll move it up a notch. I want this to be completely matte black. So get the paintbrush. There we go. That looks good to me. Now for these, basically all of these, I don't want them to be completely matte. They are gold after all, but I don't want them to be quite that reflective. So I'm going to go for a kind of middling middling grey here for these. Just increase the brush size and my opacity is set to 60. I'm going to quickly reselect this and make sure this is a completely matte black. There we go. Yeah, that looks good. Okay, so now, just as I was before, make sure your opacity is on 100%, then go for a middling grey. No, middling closer to white. Yeah, this kind of grey. I think just slightly less reflective for the gold. Obviously the blade, happy for that to be reflective. Can I? Oh, that works quite well. Especially for these kind of side pieces. Just fill it all in. Okay, so now if I go back into the completed channel, we can see the blade is very blue. It's got a lot of blue to it. The other colors are a lot less blue, as they are going to be a lot less reflective. If we now save this on top of the old normal DDS, we don't even have to go into the model file to change this. Just repacking the texture file will cause the model to be, well, changed. Let me just make sure. You can tell when it's done packing with NVIDIA's texture exporter because the temp file will disappear. Okay. So now we repack this with Witchy B&D, and then we repack this with Witchy B&D, and then we reload the game, and here we are. I think that looks quite a bit better. The kind of text markings on the blade are no longer reflective, they stick out a lot more. The gold, still shiny, still reflective, but not distracting. And the blade, obviously, very reflective. Very nice. Okay, I'm happy with the textures. Now to slightly edit the model. So I'm not sure which way I should go, because one way that you might want to do this is simply something like that. Make the handle ever so slightly thinner on its own. And I think that might be the option I go with, because the sword is already a lot shorter than its counterpart, the replacement, or what it's replacing, sorry. But you could always also shrink the entire weapon, although you'd want to do it in this kind of way, maybe, so that it doesn't lose its positioning. But I think I'm going to just just bring this in just a teeny bit. I think it's already fine actually, with the amount I brought it in. And that'll just, it won't change the UVs, it won't change anything. As far as the textures go, it should hopefully just help the player's fingers not slip in as much. So we export as FBX, make sure leaf bones are off. And then basically just re-import, delete this, delete that, import model, amsin E for textures again. Save, pack, launch. Okay, so now, as you can see in game, it's not really enough. The little finger kind of dips in at an angle, so there's more modification needed to the model. However, for this tutorial, I'm going to leave it because you have an idea as to the tweaking that takes place with these kinds of models. Okay, so now we have our model ready. We need to create an instance of that model in-game without replacing an old asset. The idea for this tutorial is to create a new weapon, change its stats, make it have the model we selected, import a description, add the name, and then have Kale sell it for 5,000 runes. So to begin that, we are going to go into here, and what I want to do is make a copy of this and rename it. We need to pick a part number that isn't used by the game. I think 3222 is probably fine at a guess. It's a good idea though to look through and pick a kind of range that you like to use, especially if you're going to be adding more than one weapon. Then extract this, go into your witchy bnd.xml, then change all instances of 0602 and replace that with 3222. Now save, and we actually have to also rename these to 3222. I'm not sure how necessary this is, as I have seen other people just rename the part file and everything seems to go okay, but I consider it good practice to have everything within your packaged part file to be of the same ID. So I decided to change all of this. Do the same for the TPF file, as that is another archive. Then what you're going to want to do in order to make this work is first of all repackage the TPF, then open the FLVER file and reassign the textures. The name of the mesh isn't actually a problem as far as I know. But like I said, I believe this step is optional. But now that is all done, we can repackage this with witchy bnd, and now we can delete the old part file. I'm going to keep the folder there just in case, for whatever reason, I need it, but the part file is the actual file that overwrites the in-game model, and that is now gone. If we were to launch the game right now, it would appear as if nothing has happened. What I'm now going to do is go into my Elden Ring folder and take the regulation.bin file and copy that into the mod folder. The regulation bin is basically all of the game's spreadsheets. It's kind of what the game uses to define things like weapon stats and shop lists, which is what we are going to be editing today. And with that, we need Smithbox. It is worth noting that if the game ever updates, the regulation bin is a file that often gets changed, and therefore if you ever have a mod fail after an update, remake the changes to this file. I'm about to create a new project, so we are going to name this the Atlantean. I'm going to first create or select the project directory, and this is the mod folder inside your Mod Engine 2 installation. And game executable is just the Elden Ring.exe file within your Elden Ring installation. I'm then going to import the row names because that will be helpful later, and click create. The project has been created. We are going to completely ignore the map editor, model editor, and go straight into the param editor. Our first call is equip param weapon, and we want to find the Royal Greatsword. Now, we can see that this has the ID 406000. It is important to know that the way Elden Ring handles these IDs is these 4 characters designate sort of upgrades or like a subsection. So you can see down here the Fire Knight's Greatsword. With each infusion, they increase the ID by 100. So with the Royal Greatsword, the actual ID is 406 in terms of what weapon this is. We need to find a space to put our own weapon, so I am going to slip it in right here where there is a spot between the Ruins Greatsword and the Grafted Blade Greatsword for 409. I'll right click, duplicate, and rename this to 4090000. I'm also going to rename the actual line to the Atlantean. The sort ID we can leave the same. For this, what we need to do is change the equip model ID. This ID here refers to the ID that we gave the parts file. So 3222 is what we want. The icon ID, as of right now, we haven't set up, but we can change some of the stats right now. So what I want to do with this weapon is lower the int requirement to 18. I want to change the correction. Correction is the amount in which your weapon scales with a stat. Down here, this is the correction type. Both of these play an effect on how strongly your weapon scales. I'm just going to set the strength to 95, and the int to 15. Then I am going to look at behavior special effects, and what I want to do is first pin this. Then I want to find the Zamor curved sword, pin that, and I am going to grab the behavior special effect from the Zamor curved sword, put that in 3 times, and the message ID as well. Then I can clear this, go back to the Atlantean, unpin the Zamor sword. Okay, let's also increase the poise from 6 to 8. Alright, so if I go up here, to File, save all modified params. Now, somewhere in the game's files exists a weapon. We need a way to access that. So what we're going to do is go into Shop Lineup Param. We're going to find Kale. And what I'm going to do is copy the torch. I'm going to duplicate. And it's already found the next available slot. Merchants have a range. The way to define a merchant's range is in the scripts folder within the game file, not within the param files. So as of right now, you can find programs to decompile those files and change them yourself. I've found that to work very well with a mod I made, where I made Kale sell a whole bunch of weapons. But if you're not willing to go through all of that, just know that each merchant usually sells from their beginning ID up until one before the next ID on the list. So Kale, I believe, will have up until 524. I think that's the maximum ID that he will sell. Anyway, this is not going to be Torch 1. This is going to be the Atlantean. And the reference ID is going to reference the equip weapon param file. With this, we can define exactly what weapon will be sold. The ID, I believe, was 4090000. And as you can see, it's filled out the Atlantean correctly. I am going to set the amount to sell to be -1, which should mean he will sell an infinite amount. And I'm going to set the sell price to 5,000. And with this, I'm going to save all modified params. And then I'm going to launch the game. And as you can see, the Royal Greatsword has returned to its original state. Now, if I check with Kale,
always.
He has a weapon with no name, using the Royal Greatsword's icon.
Goodbye.
Which we can purchase. And if we equip this, we can see that it does in fact use the model we set up earlier. And checking the stats, you can see the scaling is a lot higher, the attributes required is a lot lower, the frost buildup has actually not only been added and has a message stating how much frost buildup, but it has automatically calculated how much frost buildup will be done. You don't need to set that up yourself. And from here we can set up a name, a caption, and an icon. One thing worth noting, actually, is when I brought this currently unnamed weapon, the torch went out of stock. That is because in Smithbox, the weapons have the same event ID. For that reason, I would actually recommend, instead of setting it yourself, copying something like an arrow or a bolt, which does not have a event ID relating to a finite item. Now that our weapon is appearing in game, we need to give it a name, a caption, and an icon. We can start with the name and caption by first adding a folder called message, and in there, engus. Then we find the respective folder in the Elden Ring directory, and we're going to copy all of the item archives, and I'll unpack those just in case. Then we are going to find the menu directory in the Elden Ring location in high, and then recreate that in the mod folder. So menu, high, and copy the common archives. Oh. And I'm going to unpack those two. Okay, first, within Smithbox, I have edited the icon ID to 10102, because that is the ID that I'm going to be using for this weapon within the icon sheet. And then for the name and caption, I find it easiest to use Smithbox. Go into weapons, go all the way down, and then right here, right before where our weapon would be, duplicate, rename this to 4090000. This is the Atlantean, and I have the description here. Add a good line break, and then make sure to save all modified text. And remember to do the same for your parameters. The weapon would have a name and a caption, but no icon. For that, we need to create icon 10102. For that, we are going to open the common icon spreadsheet and open icon 03, which is right here. And we are going to add 10102 to this spot on the grid over here. First of all, I'm going to just drag the icon into Photoshop. Very easy. Rotate this around. That looks good. Now I want to save this. On top of the icon we just opened. Replace. Keep transparency. And now we can pack this back up. However, the game does not know that that is icon 10102. So we have to open the other archive, find the corresponding layout folder, open that in a text editor, move right here. I'm going to add another line with the y coordinate being 1 further. We are skipping 3 to 8 and then rename this 10102. Save this, close, pack, and launch. I'm in game, and now if I open up the menu, we can see it has a name and its caption is correct, but I need to move that icon over to the right. Okay, there we go, looking much better. Now you can see we have the Advantium, we have a description, we have a name, we have custom stats. It is its own weapon, replaces nothing from the base game. This is, for all intents and purposes, perfectly integrated into the Elden Ring world. Obviously, you can play around with different ways of integrating it. You could have it be a drop from a boss, a cave. You could maybe make multiple weapons and spread them out amongst different merchants. Regardless, I would consider this a complete weapon.